My name is Margaret Ellis. For 31 years, I worked as a registered nurse at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto. I know what it means to be on your feet at 2 a.m. when the world outside is quiet and the hallways smell like antiseptic and old coffee. I know what it means to drive home before sunrise, with your hands still smelling like latex gloves, too tired to feel anything except grateful you made it through another shift. When I retired at 63, people told me I would finally have time to rest. What they didn't tell me was how loud silence could be. My husband, Gerald, had passed 2 years before my retirement. 38 years together, and then one Tuesday in November, he was gone. A stroke. No warning, no goodbye. Just a phone call from the hospital where I had spent half my life, telling me that the man I had eaten toast with every morning was no longer breathing. My daughter Claire lives in Vancouver with her family. My son, Daniel, is in Halifax. We speak on Sundays sometimes. I love them. I know they love me. But love at a distance has a particular kind of quiet to it that no one prepares you for. So when I retired, I was alone in a 3-bedroom house in Scarborough with a garden. I no longer had the energy to tend, and a kitchen that only needed to feed one person. I sold the house 8 months later. Too many rooms, too many corners where Gerald used to stand. I moved into a smaller place, a 2-bedroom condominium in a mid-rise building in Etobicoke. Clean, manageable, anonymous in the way that new buildings are, the kind of place where neighbors pass each other in the hallway and nod without learning each other's names. The building had a small fitness center on the 2nd floor. Nothing elaborate. A few treadmills, a stationary bike, a rack of free weights, a wall of mirrors. I started going every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m, mostly to have somewhere to go, mostly to have a reason to get dressed. There was a security desk in the lobby, just inside the main entrance. Most mornings, the same man was sitting there when I came down. His name was Frank. Frank Okafor. He was in his late 60s, I guessed, with close-cropped gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses that sat slightly crooked on his face. He always had a thermos of tea on the desk beside him, and he always nodded when I walked past, the same quiet, unhurried nod that said good morning without requiring anything in return. The first time I really stopped to talk to him was a Monday in early March. It had snowed the night before, not unusually, for Toronto and the lobby floors were wet with slush from residents dragging in their boots. I had brought a tin of shortbread that I had baked over the weekend. I bake when I cannot sleep. I had 3 tins of shortbread sitting on my counter by Sunday evening, which meant I had not slept well since Thursday. I set the tin on the edge of his desk and said, "You might as well have some of this. I can't eat it all myself." He looked at the tin, then at me. Then he said, "That's very kind of you." Not enthusiastic, not performative, just that quiet, genuine, and nothing more. I went upstairs to the fitness center. When I came back down 40 minutes later, he had eaten 3 pieces and was wrapping the tin carefully with the lid, as though he wanted to keep the rest for later. He lifted it slightly when he saw me, the way you might raise a glass, and I nodded back and went to my unit. The following Monday, I brought a small loaf of banana bread. The Monday after that, blueberry scones. It became a habit the way habits form when you are living alone, not by decision, but by repetition, until one day you realize that Monday mornings have started to feel different from other mornings, and the difference is a small tin on a lobby desk. Frank never asked me to bring anything. He never expected it, as far as I could tell. He always said thank you in that same unhurried way. And sometimes we talked for a few minutes before I went upstairs about the weather, about what was in the news, about whether the building management was ever going to fix the elevator on the east side that had been making a grinding noise since December. Small conversations. the kind that don't ask much of you. I learned, across those weeks, that Frank had worked security for most of his adult life, that he had a son named Marcus, who had moved to Calgary several years ago, and whom he did not speak to often. He said this the way people say things they have made peace with, evenly, without bitterness, but I noticed that he did not say it easily either. There was something careful in how he held that particular piece of information, like he was carrying it in both hands. I told him about Gerald once, briefly. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "He sounds like he was a steady man." I had never heard that word used that way, and somehow it was the most accurate thing anyone had said to me about my husband in 2 years. Steady, yes. That was exactly what Gerald had been. Spring came slowly the way it always does in Ontario. 2 warm days, then a week of gray cold, then a morning when you walk outside and something has shifted and you know it is finally coming. I had started to look forward to Monday mornings, in a way I had not looked forward to much in a long time. Then one Monday in April, I came down to the lobby, and Frank was not at the desk. There was a younger man there instead, maybe mid-30s, wearing the same uniform but sitting differently in the chair, the way a substitute sits like the seat belongs to someone else. His name tag said, R. Santos. I stopped at the desk. "Is Frank off today?" The man looked up. Something in his expression shifted, careful, the way people look when they are trying to figure out what to say. "Mr. Okafor called in," he said. "He'll be back next week." I said okay and went upstairs. I did the treadmill for 30 minutes without really thinking about it. When I came back down, I left the tin of oatmeal cookies on the desk with a note that said only, "For Frank, when he's back." Margaret, 14B. He was back the following Monday. He looked the same, mostly same glasses, same thermos, same quiet nod. But there was something more tired about the set of his shoulders that I noticed. The way nurses notice things, by long habit. He saw the tin still sitting on the corner of the desk. The man from the week before had left it there, apparently, and he looked at the note, then at me, and said, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," I said. "I brought a fresh tin anyway." I always brought a fresh tin. I went up to the fitness center. I had been on the treadmill for about 20 minutes when the door opened and our Santos, the man from last week, stepped in. He was not dressed for the gym. He was still in his uniform. He looked around the room as if confirming I was the only person there, then walked toward me. I slowed the treadmill. "Mrs. Ellis?" he said. "Miss," I said, out of reflex. "What's it?" He lowered his voice, which is not something people do when the news is ordinary. "I'm sorry to bother you up here. I wanted to mention something before you headed back down. There's a man he's been in the lobby the last few mornings, early, around the same time you come down. He's not a resident. He signed in as a visitor twice, but left without going up either time. He just sat in the lobby chairs near the entrance, and then left." I stepped off the treadmill. "Did he say who he was visiting?" "He gave the name on the visitor log as Frank Okafor, both times." He paused. "Mr. Okafor hasn't mentioned expecting anyone, and the man he watches the elevator. He watches people coming out." I stood there for a moment. "Did you ask Frank about it?" I said. "I mentioned it to him this morning. He went very quiet. He said he didn't know who it was, but he didn't look like a man who didn't know. He said this simply, without drama, just reporting what he had observed. 'I thought you should know, since you're here early most mornings. Just to be aware.'" I thanked him. He nodded and left. I stood in the empty fitness room for a moment, the treadmill still running on its own beside me, the belt moving and going nowhere. I went back down to the lobby. Frank was at the desk. There were no other visitors in the chairs near the entrance. I walked past the desk and paused. "Frank," I said quietly, "is everything all right?" He looked at me over the top of his glasses. For a long moment he didn't say anything, and I recognized that look. I had seen it many times in hospital corridors, on the faces of patients' family members. The look of someone deciding how much to let you in. "My son is in town," he finally said. I waited. He called me last week. First time in 4 years. He straightened a pen on the desk that didn't need straightening. He said he wanted to talk. I told him I needed a few days. I wasn't ready. He paused. I suppose he got tired of waiting. I thought about the way he had said Calgary that one time, holding it carefully in both hands. "He's been coming here," I said. "To the lobby." "So I'm told." He looked out through the glass front doors at the street. He always was stubborn. "Gets it from his mother." I said, "Do you want to see him?" He was quiet for a long time. "I don't know what I want," he said. And then, softer, "That's the honest truth." I sat down in one of the chairs near his desk. I hadn't planned to. I just did. "Gerald and I had a year," I said, "when Daniel was in his 20s. They didn't speak for almost a year. I don't even fully remember now what it started over. Some argument about money, about choices, about who Daniel was and who Gerald thought he should be. A whole year of Sunday calls where I talked to each of them separately and pretended I wasn't carrying both sides of something." Frank listened. "And then Gerald got sick. Not the stroke that was later he had a scare, something with his heart. And Daniel drove through the night from Halifax. He just drove. Didn't call ahead, just showed up at the hospital at 4 in the morning. I stopped for a moment. Gerald never said he was sorry for the argument. Daniel never said he was either. They just started again. Like a clock that had stopped and then started again." Frank looked down at the desk. "You don't have to forgive everything all at once," I said. "You just have to open the door." He didn't say anything for a while. Then he picked up the phone at his desk, dialed a number and said, "It's your father. I'm at the front desk. Come up." He didn't say which building. He didn't give an address, which meant his son was already nearby, waiting somewhere close, waiting to be called. 20 minutes later, a man in his late 30s came through the front doors. He had Frank's eyes behind a younger, less certain version of Frank's face. He stopped a few feet from the desk. Frank stood up slowly, the way people stand up when they are not entirely sure their legs will hold them. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then the younger man said, "Hi, Dad." And Frank said, "You look tired. You need a coffee." That was all. That was everything. I took my tin and went quietly back upstairs. I stood in my kitchen for a while and thought about Sunday mornings and distance and the particular sound of a telephone being answered. Then I picked up my phone and called Claire. It rang 3 times. She picked up and said, "Mom, it's Tuesday." "I know," I said. "I just wanted to hear your voice." There was a brief silence on the line, and then she said, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "I made oatmeal cookies. I'll send a box." She laughed, her small, genuine laugh that I had not heard in longer than I wanted to admit, and said, "You always bake when you can't sleep." "I know," I said. We talked for 40 minutes. About her kids, about her work, about nothing important, about everything. About whether she and her family might come to Toronto in the summer, and she said probably yes, and I said, "Good, I'll make up the spare room." When we hung up, the apartment was still quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. The kind that comes after something has been said rather than before. I saw Frank the following Monday. He had his thermos on the desk, his glasses slightly crooked, same as always. "How did it go?" I asked. "We had coffee," he said. "And then dinner." And then he came back the next morning, and we had breakfast. He looked up. He's here for a week. That's a start, I said. It's a start, he agreed. I set the tin on the corner of the desk lemon shortbread this time. He looked at it, and then at me and said, "You know, you've been bringing me baked goods for 3 months, and I don't think I've ever asked you what you did before you retired." "I was a nurse," I said. He nodded slowly, like that explained something. "You notice things," he said. "Nurses do," I said. I went upstairs to the fitness center. The building was just beginning to wake up around me. The elevators moving, the muffled sounds of morning routines through the walls, the city outside getting louder. All those separate lives, going on in parallel, barely touching. And yet sometimes they do touch. Sometimes a tin of cookies on a lobby desk and a conversation that asks nothing of you turns into something that matters to someone in a way you never anticipated. You don't plan for it. You just show up on Monday mornings and you bring what you have. Gerald used to say that kindness was not a strategy. It was not something you deployed in hope of a return. It was simply what you did when you had more to give than you needed to keep. I thought he was right then. I think so even more now. Be kind to the people who hold the quiet corners of your day, the ones who nod when you walk past, the ones who are carrying something in both hands and not saying so. You don't always know what a small thing will mean to someone, and you never know when they might be the one who says something that changes the whole direction of a day or a year or a life. It costs nothing. It costs nothing at all.